Well, now the first of 4 programmes in which Bob Wellings sets out on a journey along the south coast of Hampshire, the Solent Way.
When it was first suggested that I do the Solent Walk, it did occur to me that it's not entirely my kind of thing. It has to be said that I'm not the obvious candidate for a 60-mile walk, in this instance from short of Milford to Emsworth, well the other side of Portsmouth. I mean, there are others younger and fitter. But then that's really the point. Anyone can do the Solent Walk, or so they say. So, anyone can do it, eh, Fran? Yes, this is Fran, a country dog who's accompanying me on the first part of the journey, before we get to the built-up areas. She's not good with traffic. And for those who aren't brilliant at map reading, and I'm one, there are even markers to point the way. At the moment, on this first leg of the journey, we're trudging along an extraordinary natural phenomenon known as Hurst Spit, a 1.5 mile bank of shingle reaching out from the mainland halfway across to the Isle of Wight. It's the Solent's narrowest point, and trudging is the word. It's been described as rather like climbing a mountain on the flat. Our destination on this first bit of the journey is Hurst Castle, a lowering presence on the end of the spit. Impressive in a threatening sort of way. Go on, Fred. That hefty rusting cannon near the entrance to the castle, by the way, was only very recently hauled out of the Solent, where it had lain for a few hundred years. Hurst Castle is originally Tudor, and what it and others like it represent is Henry VIII's understandable obsession with possible invasion by the French, and he built a string of such castles along the entire south coast. This one was to defend Southampton and the Solent from any attack via the Needles, altered and added to by later generations, most notably in the early 19th century. Today a museum, the roof of the castle also affords a most marvellous viewing platform of this, the narrowest point of the city. The water is really funneled through, with resultant heavy and treacherous seas, and a challenge for yachtsmen. It's no accident that the Needles Lighthouse is where it is. Anything coming through here was shot down by the gun batteries. Now, on quitting Hurst Castle, and not before a visit to the little tea room inside, you can either walk back the way we came on the shingle spit, or take the little ferry which plies its way to and from Keyhaven, which is what Fran and I pretty rapidly elected to do.
Ferry to Keyhaven, yes?
That's right, yes.
Come on.
Today's passenger is just this one man and his dog, but in full season, the little ferry will carry 30,000 people to the castle and back. The ferryman on this occasion was Alan Wheel.
It's a nice job, this.
Oh, it's fine, yes.
How long have you been doing it?
Oh, man and boy for the last 5 years.
Where are you from, then?
Well, I worked in London before I came here.
What, in the rat race?
In the rat race, yeah.
Well, this must be idyllic, isn't it?
Well, some people say, do you get bored? Well, you do get bored sometimes, occasionally. But what a nice place to be bored in.
Absolutely. Are they all impressed by the castle when they come?
We get quite a lot of Americans, actually. Some are very impressed, but we had a couple who came and they didn't stay very long, and on the way back he said, well, to his wife, who's called Myrtle or something, well, Myrtle, we've seen 7 castles this week, and this is the least memorable.
The least memorable.
Yeah.
Because just watching you maneuver where all these boats are anchored, it's quite a tricky little passage, isn't it?
Well, it's just a small, shallow river, you see, and we like it like that. I mean, some people say, would you dredge it out? But then we get a lot of big visitors, and we're not too keen on that, you see.
Yeah. What's he on about?
Next time, lucky.
Sometimes it's best not to ask.
Just treat that as a private conversation,
That's
right?
right.
Okay.
For the skipper, then, some fancy navigation required through the mud flats. For the passenger, the one man and his dog, just a very pleasant trip.
Come on, then. Come on. Alan, thanks very much.
Yep.
Very nice trip.
Bye-bye. Bye.
And this is where passengers set off from and return to Keyhaven, a pretty little place with a scattering of working boats and sailing craft. But it's the village pub, the Gun Inn, which points to Keyhaven's rather grisly claim to fame. The gun in question belonged to one Colonel Peter Hawker.
Hawker's Cottage, Hawker's Cottage, Hawker's Cottage. What's this about, Fran? One of Keyhaven's most notable characters, Colonel Peter Hawker.
Colonel Hawker's main mission in life appears to have been the slaughter of everything which moved on the surrounding marshes. His dedication to the task was total, and in his diary he records with gusto that between 1802 and 1853 he killed 17,753 living things. One uncharacteristic diary entry reads, "A sorry list of the past barren season. Grand total only 202 head." Leaving behind the Colonel's cottage, and with past echoes of gunshot ringing in our ears, Fran and I head for the great flat Pennington marshes. It's all rather unexpected, the sort of scenery you'd expect to see in far more remote and rugged parts of Britain. These marshes, now a beautifully wild nature reserve, were once the base of a major national industry, salt. Upon humps like that stood windmills which pumped the partly evaporated and thus concentrated seawater from the salt pans to the boiling houses, where it was rendered into salt. The salt was, of course, enormously important as a preservative. Manufacture of salt in this way thrived until the mid-19th century, when it proved cheaper to mine it in Lancashire. As industrial buildings go, the boiling houses look rather prettier than the later dark satanic mills. Apart from Colonel Hawker's slaughtering of birds, the other sport which thrived here at the turn of the century was golf. Yes, hard to believe when you look at the place, but they do still find the odd golf ball. But as President Reagan is inclined to say, you ain't heard nothing yet. And even more extraordinary was the attempt in 1934 by a German, one Herr Zucker, to send mail from these marshes to the Isle of Wight by rocket.
Now going to fire it across the Solent to the Isle of Wight. An electric detonator fires a charge in the base. In the nose are the letters. Zucker claims that it will travel at 900 miles an hour.
1, 2, 3.
Unfortunately, it fell less than a mile away.
So it went up and then, well, it came down again. The rocket was very badly bent. The mail was damaged by mud and water, but was dried out and posted in the normal way in Lymington. Pretty odd, Fran.
The building of George and Lymington was helped in no small way by the income generated by the gentlemen who found the now disused creeks and inlets of the salt pans useful in the pursuit of their trade. They were smugglers. It's hard to imagine that today's genteel Lymington was also a hotbed of piracy until they found that smuggling to be more profitable. The harbour is now a tourist attraction. No longer does it witness the export of New Forest timber or the import of coal, both important industries in the past. And the terraces where the workers lived no longer house their families. Now they shelter the providers of Lymington's new wealth, those who've retired or those who've bought holiday homes. And they've bought those homes to be near their yachts. And there are plenty of them, tied up in orderly rows, not looking as though they really want to venture out to sea, and many of them rarely do. The Isle of Wight ferry, bustling to and fro across the Solent between Lymington and Yarmouth, creates the greatest flurry of activity for most of the time. A haven, then, for the boating tribe. As one of the creatures not shot by Colonel Hawker, Rat in The Wind of the Willows, said, "There is nothing, absolutely nothing, half so much worth doing as simply messing about in boats. Simply messing about in boats."
The Englishman's dream is a force 5 abeam when the wind in the mainsail bellies. For an Englishman has the sea in his blood, and a fair bit more in his wellies. Oh, the place to be for an Englishman is an English harbour where he'll bend over backwards to please himself, or perhaps the French au pair. Oh, the running tide and the salty spray and the wind that turns you blue, and the look on the face that's discovered you can't have your kayak and heat it too.
Okay, these are the oars, and that bit's the water. It's quite fun, all this rowing. Some idiot said it was sharp end first, but then you can't see where you're going.
The pleasure boat passes, the lower classes. The upper set sets sail, and maritime crimes are a bit of a bind for the one who has to go bail. Oh, what can beat scraping home first in the race, or sailing the world in a clipper, but a tall stool and a short glass, and a barman who'll call you skipper.
And a skipper on the grand scale, a local admiral, left the town a bequest commemorated by a plaque. Erected by subscription as a tribute of respect and gratitude to Admiral Sir Harry Neil Bart, GCB, for his munificent gift of the iron columns for the public lamps of this town, 1832. Not the lamps themselves, mind you, just the posts for the lamps. And an even bigger monument to the Admiral stands on the hill above Lymington and is my next port of call.